Alrighty, looks like we're getting started. So, welcome to the stream. Welcome to Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. If you like this channel or you're just new, you please like and subscribe. I usually go live on Fridays at this time around 1, and I do videos daily. Ultimately, as I grow, I would like to be live streaming more often. Anyway, like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. And I'm going to give it another couple seconds for people to come in. We got a lot to go over today. I've been looking through a lot of data. Hold on, let me just change one of these screens so I can set that up. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about. We're going to go over a whole bunch of stuff. We're talking about the American Jobs Plan, specifically the Jobs Plan. I just want to reiterate how ridiculous Mitch McConnell's threat is against corporations. We're going to talk very briefly about this better voters idea. It's a really dumb idea. It doesn't make any sense, and the answer is not the better voters. It's to have lawmakers who actually do what the voters want. Joe Manchin. Then we're going to learn about guns. We're going to go over Joe Biden's speech about gun control, and then we're going to look into the data. Because the point of this, I'm going to be very, very clear. I'm going to reiterate this a whole bunch of times. I'm not looking for individual people stopping home invasions or self-defense. There will be data on that in what I show you, but it is not the main point that I'm looking at. The data I'm specifically looking for, and if people want to argue, I'm being too narrow with my view, I disagree, because this is an argument. The argument I'm looking to educate people on, and myself, is whether or not a good guy with a gun actually stops a bad guy with a gun. Now, this is something we've been hearing for years and years and years. This is why we can't. They say, hey, look, if you stop good people from getting guns, then they can't stop bad people from doing things with guns. So we're going to look into that data, because there's a lot of data, way more than I thought. But we're just going to go overall that data. We're going to go over what the actual definition of a mass shooting is, because as it currently stands, there's 128 mass shootings so far in America. It's possible that I'm a couple days off, my number's off. This is my numbers from yesterday, so it's very easy that something has changed just because of how America is. So, hold on one second. Got something in my throat. Okay. So, Jobs Act. The American Jobs Act is what Joe Biden is advocating for. It's currently his next piece of legislation. Now, what he's advocating for right now is kind of irrelevant, since Congress doesn't come back into office until next week. Next week they come into office, and they're going to go through the Jobs Act, and then they're going to put HR 1 to the floor, and then possibly some gun control bills and something else. It's not clear what exactly they're going to be actually advocating for or pushing for. Now, the current pushback on the American Jobs Act is it doesn't have enough infrastructure in it. Now, there's two things to this. One, Pete Buttigieg, who is the transportation secretary, has been on TV multiple times defending this. Now, I don't know about you, but I watch the news a lot. And there was a lot of infrastructure weeks under the Trump administration. I don't remember seeing Elaine Chao advocating for this. She was the transportation secretary. So this is what he was doing. He was advocating for his position. So this is the bill. Let's speak very clear about this bill. It is not an infrastructure bill. It is a jobs bill. A lot of it just happens to be focused on infrastructure. That is a big part. Why? Our infrastructure is really bad. It is. We rank something like 13th in the world. The other thing is, infrastructure is an investment that the longer you put off investing in it, the more it's going to cost. They're talking about the Amtrak tunnels. They have to basically de-ice them all the time. They said the only way for us to solve this is to build a new tunnel. And every day that we don't start construction on the tunnel, it costs $1 million extra. That was data from that was something I saw 2 weeks ago. So, as big as this number appears to be, and it does look like a big number. It's $2.3 trillion. It is over 8 years. So it's $800 It's $300 billion a year. $40 billion of that goes to a universal infrastructure for the whole country. The problem with that is just New York. It's $40 billion to get it up to snuff. So this $40 billion is not adequate. The biggest problem with this bill is it's a stopgap. Even $2.5 trillion is a stopgap for how bad this infrastructure is. We need a massive, massive investment. And let's be clear, some of the other things in this bill. This will create jobs, good union jobs, for creating these, building these tunnels, for fixing the bridges, for fixing the streets, for removing lead pipes. This will create jobs for research, because that's one of the other things. So one of the arguments is, and I went over this in my video for Marsha Blackburn, is that there's too much other stuff that's not in it. One of the things she pointed out was green energy research. Now, I'm not going to repeat the fact that climate change is real, but I'm going to tell you that the future is whichever country can figure out how to make climate technology profitable, fastest, and most effective. So how would you do that? Well, the answer is you would do research. So how do you do that research? You fund it. Look, we've already seen that when you actually put funding into research, they can come up with massive, massive advancements. We just saw it with COVID. They came out with this vaccine. They said they did 10 years of research in 10 months. So we can do this if we put the money in it. And this will create green energy jobs, which are generally higher paying than oil and gas jobs. We can create new factories to build these things. We can expand what we sell out to other countries. We could be the leaders in this. But if we don't put the effort in it, we're just going to be, I guess we're going to be stuck in the Middle East and relying on other things. And this other argument is that, we're going to have to be relying on China for the batteries to run these things. Well, if we do the research so we can create it ourselves, we don't have to be relying on China. This is such a stupid argument. Advancement is going to happen. The question is, are we going to lead it, or are we going to be falling behind? The other thing is, one of the big part of this, $400 billion, is for elderly care. Now, the fact that elderly care needs $400 billion is a lot. That's crazy. That's how much money they need. Now, part of it is obviously raising the wages of people who do elderly care. Their wages go up. The other thing is, if you didn't notice during the pandemic, one of the biggest things is making sure that the elderly people were safe and the people who cared for them were also safe, and that how much effort that took. So making sure that your elderly are cared for is a big issue. Making sure that children are cared for. So when we have daycare costs, I think that's in this bill as well. That would help. So this is a word of advice for Democrats. One, every single aspect of this bill has about 50% polling among every single group. Every single aspect. So you have the popular position. You don't have to kowtow to make this bill worse. The things in this bill are popular as it stands with the American people. That's just the way it is. That's what the polling shows, and that's what the data shows. Two, don't worry about what's defining infrastructure. This is not an infrastructure bill. It is a jobs bill. Now, the other thing is, how are they going to pass this? The answer is reconciliation. It is, without a doubt, reconciliation. Thankfully, the parliamentarian this time made the right ruling. Even the last time they could have overruled them. And that ruling says that they now have a two more shots at reconciliation. Knowing this, the American Jobs Program and the American Tax Plan, which is the second part of the Jobs Program, which is how he's going to pay for it, even though deficit, there's nothing we can do deficit spending. It works. It'll help us in the long run. That's how we grow in the future. So, the American Tax Plan. By putting the American Tax Plan with the American Jobs Plan in one bill, you take both of them together. And then you still have one more reconciliation bill. I don't know what you would do with that, because I'm not sure what is his argument, what bill will fall under that. But if you split it and use both of your reconciliation bills on those two things, you have nothing left. You should put as much as you possibly can in one of these bills. And don't worry about what the argument is of, oh, these things aren't relevant to each other. Just pass them. As long as they're popular with the American people, which they are, pass them. This idea that they're not popular, so we gotta separate it because we want the Republicans to come with us, is not a good idea. They were against the American Rescue Plan, had 70% approval. Every single one of them voted against it. Multiple of them have now advocated for the things that the American Rescue Plan gave to their constituents. They said, oh, look, I got you Madison Cawthorn. I got North Carolina's 11th. I got us funding for a hospital or whatever it was. And then, but he didn't say where it came from. Where did it come from? It came from the American Rescue Plan. Shocker. Actually, the other thing is, the American Rescue Plan gives a lot of money for Medicare. So if you are one of the 12 states that haven't expanded Medicare, you have no reason not to because it's covered by the government. The federal government's covering. The only reason, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, to not expand Medicare if you're getting it covered by the government, because generally it's 90% covered, but this gives you a surplus now to cover the rest of it, is because you hate poor people and you don't want people to have health care. That is the only excuse. It's not, it's too expensive. It's being covered by other people. It's not. That's not what it is. Okay. So that's. We're going to talk about that in a minute. They have the advantage in this. You put everything in this bill and don't worry about it. Because let's be clear, if this bill goes through reconciliation, we can now compare, as I believe it is, because it doesn't appear that there's going to be a Republican who's going to support it. But I'm going to get to that in a minute. We can compare the two bites, the first two reconciliation bills that went under Donald Trump versus the first two of Joe Biden. Now, to be fair, Joe Biden's first bill was a response to a pandemic, and so his first bill had to be something specific, and it was that bill was the American Rescue Plan. There was a lot of other good things in it. The child tax credit, which I think that's what they're going to try to stabilize permanently for the third reconciliation bill. But there's a lot of other things in that. Unfortunately, $15 minimum wage, they let slip through their hands. That's what we saw there. We saw the American Rescue Plan, we see the American Jobs Plan / American Tax Plan for the Biden administration. That's generally what's probably going to happen for the reconciliation. On the other side, the first bill pushed through for reconciliation under the Trump administration that failed was to take away your health care. That's what it was. It was the repeal of Obamacare. And it wasn't repeal and replace. It was repeal. They were going to do a skinny repeal or a heavy repeal. That was it. Thankfully, John McCain, three senators, managed to vote it down. That's why it got lost. So there was that there. The other thing is, in that bill, there was a massive tax cut. Because that was the whole goal, was to cut taxes for the wealthy. And we know this because somebody asked Donald Trump about it, and he said, no, we're talking about health care. And they're like, no, there's a huge tax cut in this bill. So then the second thing that was pushed through reconciliation that passed was the 2017 tax cut. The 2017 tax cut was a $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthy. It did not pay for itself. It was direct deficit spending. We have 50 years of data that proves that trickle-down economics does not work. And this brings me to Mitch McConnell. Now, Republicans are a little salty because corporations got pressured into calling them out on their hypocrisy. And we're going to talk about this when we talk about Texas in a bit. But when the MLB moved from Georgia to Colorado, they said, okay, well, how dare you do this? So originally when Delta spoke out against this law, the Republicans in the Georgia House tried to get rid of their tax cuts. And then they got stopped by the senators. The senators didn't allow that to pass. Now, the advantage of that was, that's them threatening these corporations. I mean, obviously, corporations paying more taxes is always a good thing because generally they don't pay enough. The downside to this, and this is something we're going to probably see as more and more of these states try to pass more restrictive laws, and it's probably something we'll see in Arkansas after they pass that transgender law. Now, I've covered the transgender law a couple times, but to be clear, the whole point of the transgender law is to make sure that children Let me repeat that. Children who need hormone blockers or different types of hormones, whether they're a boy getting girls, or some type of medical treatment because they have gender dysmorphia, or they're not sure whether they're transgender or not. It's making sure that they can't get medical care until they turn 18, even if their parents approve it. That's what that bill says. There is no scientific evidence. So when you see people like Charlie Kirk or Tucker Carlson say, "Oh, why are you stopping them from chemical castration?" That's not what this bill is. It is not what that is not what it does. It stops them from getting basic medical care that they need. So as bills like this pass, like we saw when they passed the North Carolina bathroom bill, it is likely that corporations will take their business elsewhere, meaning that Republicans who cry about blue states and poorly run blue cities are going to hurt the people in those states because of their either outright lies about the election or their hatred of minorities, because transgender people are a minority. It's that simple. That's just how it's going to happen. So that's what it is. So Mitch McConnell went out and said, corporations, you're, I can't do a Mitch McConnell voice. You're not supposed to be in politics. You should just be worried about making a profit because that's what you're good at. And then Mitch McConnell realized, wait, I'm Mitch McConnell. What am I saying? I can't be telling corporations not to give us money. That's like my whole thing. So he had to backpedal the next day, and he came out and he said, they can still give us corporate donations, but they shouldn't say anything about the corporate donations, and they shouldn't worry about what laws we pass. Just keep giving us money. So two things to this, and then he said, or else. Two things to this. One, because of Citizens United, corporate donations are considered speech from corporations. Corporate donations are speech, but corporations actually saying things, like their CEOs saying something, free speech is not speech. Corporate donations are speech. That's what it says according to Mitch McConnell. Also, I'm not sure that there has ever been a more empty threat in the history of the world than Mitch McConnell threatening corporations. Like, what exactly are you going to do? Are you going to raise their taxes? Are you going to stop them from contributing to your campaigns? Are you going to, what exactly is the threat here, Mitch McConnell? Everyone knows you're not going to actually do anything to it. So it's not a threat that anyone can take seriously in any way, shape, or form. So that's one of the other things. And then this is something else that comes up for the tax bill, is this conflation to corporations and people. Fox and Friends was doing this thing to Ainsley Earhardt, where they were talking about the tax rate. So currently, the tax rate is 21%. Gary Cohn, who was Donald Trump's financial advisor, said, 21% is probably too low. Joe Biden wants to raise it slightly. It was 35% before the tax cut. He wants to raise it to 28%. Joe Manchin wants to raise it to 25%. Why? Because Joe Manchin is bought and paid for by corporations. That's why every single time there's something to help the people, Joe Manchin does the wrong thing. Every single time. And I'm going to repeat this every single time. The American Rescue Plan, there was not a single part that Joe Manchin decided, I have an issue with this, that was made better by Joe Manchin having an issue with it. Every single part he touched was made noticeably worse. So, how are they conflating you to corporations? Well, simple. If corporations have to pay more taxes, you have to pay more taxes. Also, if they close the loopholes, the corporate tax loopholes, you and your family can't take advantage of them. I'm not a corporation. Are you a corporation? No, you're not. You don't take advantage of corporate tax loopholes anyway. That's not how this works. You pay your individual taxes, not your corporate taxes. So how would my taxes go up because they close corporate loopholes? And this is the type of thing they say on Fox, because their whole goal is basically just to scare people into paying less taxes. Or the corporations and the wealthy to pay less taxes, which all of them are. Every single person on Fox is a millionaire. Tucker Carlson is a millionaire. He was a millionaire because he's the heir to the Swanson family fortune. He's also a white supremacist. He was literally advocating for the Great Replacement theory last night. A couple days ago, he was just saying that the attack on the Capitol was no big deal. That's what he was saying. So that's what you know. When they talk about the corporate tax rate, they're talking about corporations. You are a human being. You are not a corporation. There's the difference. You don't pay what the corporations pay because they pay nothing. Nothing. 50 Fortune 500 companies have paid zero taxes for the last 3 years. So, look, there's that. Let's talk about Joe Manchin. Now, Joe Manchin recently came out against the filibuster. He said, "I will not do anything to weaken it because I want bipartisanship." So let's go look at some of his quotes, because he has one quote that is so egregious. I thought it would have been said by a Republican how dumb it was, because there are, and we're gonna go to some of the dumb Republican quotes and some other things, but let's go see what Joe Manchin had to say. All right, this is not. Oh, I'll go to that next. All right. So here, Joe Manchin, he's talking about voting reform. This is just a snippet of what he said. The only thing I would caution anybody and everybody is that we had an insurrection on January 6th because of voting, right? And a lack of trust in voting. We should not at all attempt to do anything that would create more distrust and division. Now, the overall statement he was making was that any voting rights, any voting legislation should appeal to Trump supporters. Now, let's talk about how dumb this statement is. The January 6th insurrection was not because of voting. The January 6th insurrection was because these people were lied to for months by the president, by their governors, by their legislators, by the Fox News, by OAN, by Mike Lindell. They were lied to about voter fraud. And you know what came of this? Nothing. Because they were lying. They had 60 plus court cases. They won one. What did that court case do? They could go stand 4 feet closer. It had no impact. And these were not just Obama judges. These were Trump judges. These were Bush judges. Every single person. This was his Supreme Court. With three Supreme Courts. With Gorsuch, with Kavanaugh, with Amy Coney Barrett. They threw it out. Dominion sued Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell, who was considered the Kraken and one of the big people pushing the big lie. Remember, she was advocating with Michael Flynn in front of Donald Trump to declare martial law so she could take a look at the Dominion voting and prove it. Dominion sued her. Her legal defense was, no reasonable person can take the things that I say seriously. That's her legal defense. It was the same legal defense as Dr. Carlson used a couple years ago. Okay? So, who else lied about this? Well, we got Dan Patrick here. No, hold on. This is all right. So Dan Patrick is the lieutenant governor of Texas. Dan Patrick, if you don't happen to remember him from Fox News, was the jackass who went on to Fox News and said, some things are more important than living. You know, like the economy and making sure grandma dies so that I can keep my economy going. This is who Dan Patrick is. Now, Dan Patrick was pushing voter fraud. He offered $1 million reward for evidence of voter fraud of the November 6th election. All right? So, since in order for Joe Biden to have won or lost, to win this election based on their lies about voter fraud, there would have to have been somewhere between 40,000 and 7 million votes. Because the 40,000 was how many votes basically spread across the states that he won. They gave him the Electoral College, and 7 million is how many more popular votes he got. Okay? There would have to, which would be an order of magnitude somewhere between 40 and 7,000 times more than all of the voter fraud found in the last 50 years in this one election. The same election that the Donald Trump Department of Homeland Security said was the most secure election in history. Okay? So, in response to Dan Patrick's $1 million reward claim, John Fetterman, who is the governor of Pennsylvania, seized on this. There's 3 people. This is just the first one. In Pennsylvania, who have been charged with voter fraud. 2 of them have been convicted. They were all Republicans. Almost all the voter fraud that was found in 2020 was Republicans. Pretty much all of it. So here's his response. Hey, Governor Patrick, it's your counterpart in Pennsylvania. I'd like to collect your handsome reward for reporting voter fraud. I got a dude in 40 Fort, PA, who tried to have his dead mom vote for Trump. Now, somebody actually asked Dan Patrick about this recently. I couldn't find the clip. And his response was, I don't answer stupid questions. Well, Dan Patrick, this is not a stupid question. You owe him $1 million because you pushed a big lie. Now, back to Joe Manchin. Because, why won't you close? There we go. Anyway. So, now that we've proved Joe Manchin here is basically siding with the people who are lying, we have to go into the bigger issue. Joe Manchin's refusal to do anything about the filibuster. He's not the only one. Kristen Sinema is the other one. They're the 2 main ones. Now, here is what, if I was the Joe Biden administration, I would tell Joe Manchin. Joe, I understand you believe that we need to have compromise. The Republicans have outright said, I will not vote for this bill regardless of what's in this. You go find me 10 Republicans. You and Kristen find me 10 Republicans who will vote for this bill or willing to, in good faith, compromise. Because what happened during the American Rescue Plan? There was 10 senators who came to the White House and they gave him a garbage bill. It was 1/3 the size. And then when they were putting amendments in, some of their amendments made it. And what happened? None of them voted for it. This was the same thing that happened during Obamacare. Republicans will not, in good faith, negotiate. They will not. They approved it over and over again. And people are saying, oh, you're being too harsh on them. Your actions dictate how people think about you. Your actions have proven over and over again that you will not do the right thing for the American people. That's just the way it is. That's just how it's been. That's just what's going on there. That's just how the Republican Party has worked for so long. So, if you truly believe that Joe Manchin, you believe that there should be bipartisanship, go find me 10 Republicans. And if you can't, here's the compromise. We'll move to a talking filibuster. We will move to the delayed filibuster that I talked about in my other filibuster video. The one that says, okay, here's, after X amount of days, you need 50 votes or 55 votes. You need 57 votes. You need 50 votes. Eventually, after like a week of arguing over this, okay? And that's what we'll do. This way, you'll get your compromise, but they will not do it. And Joe Biden was right about this. He says this. We have a video for this. We cannot do nothing about this. If you want to compromise, we'll discuss it, but it has to be good faith compromise. If you want to not compromise, if you want to just have a woefully inaccurate, and a woefully underrepresented and an ineffective bill, that will not fly. And that's the way you should look at it. We welcome compromise, but we're not gonna allow you just to compromise in bad faith. Okay? And Joe, this is on you. Because let's be clear about what things won't be passed because Joe Manchin refused to get rid of this filibuster. H.R. 1. H.R. 1 is For the People's Act. That's the Voting Rights Act. That will expand voting rights. It will allow for the public financing of elections instead of private financing of elections. It will just make it easier to vote and will allow more people to be part of the democracy. It will also ungerrymandered districts. So what it would ultimately do is say that if you're in a district that's going to be gerrymandered, all districts are going to be drawn up by a nonpartisan third party. Instead of whoever's in charge gets to draw whatever districts they like. This is how we end up with Congress people who hold power indefinitely. Perfect example is this: Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Matt Gaetz, even if somehow, miraculously, it turns out that all of the reporting that all of the Venmo transactions, because apparently he paid for prostitution, allegedly, through Venmo, all of these other things that he has done, and all of the stuff that tied him to Joel Greenberg, who just is about to make a plea deal, all of that doesn't get him convicted or under investigation, or not under investigation, an indictment, and cause him to step down. Matt Gaetz would win in his district. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who literally is the least effective congressperson ever, because she is incapable of being in any committees, because she is a lunatic and got thrown off of her committees because, among other things, being QAnon. She was thrown off of her committees for advocating violence against the people she works with, most including putting a bullet in Nancy Pelosi's head and advocating for the January 6th insurrection. She is incapable of passing any bills. All she was able to do was basically try to shut down Congress for a couple days. Somehow, her district made her raise the most amount of money in any first-term congressperson ever. This woman literally cannot do anything. She doesn't understand most of what's going on in the country. She's woefully inadequate. She's woefully unintelligent. And she is a conspiracy theorist. And she raised the most amount of money. So by ungerrymandering districts like this, we won't have people who are just so crazy, but as long as they have the right letter next to their name, they will be in office indefinitely. So that won't happen. What else won't happen? We won't get any type of gun reform. Joe Manchin says he wants to do something from 2013 that he was pushing. We're in 2021, Joe. I'm going to show you a lot of data. Gun violence has gotten pretty bad in America. It is. Your 2013 thing is not going to help. There was two bills. It was a background check and to close the Charleston loophole. Why is it called the Charleston loophole? Because the guy who shot up a church in Charleston was able to use it to shoot up a church from getting that firearm. So that's what happened there. What else? What else would get blocked by Joe Manchin? Any expansion of healthcare? Any expansion for civil rights? That's all blocked. None of the Republicans will not do any type of immigration reform. Will not happen. It just won't. And those are the things Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are blocking. So the answer is, you go find them. Otherwise, sit down, shut the hell up, and let us do what we have to do in order to help the American people. And I don't care that you're in this red state, so you have to appear to be pushing back against against the left. Because look, we're not really liberal party even then. We're still a pretty center-right party. But the idea that blocking Congress from doing anything is a more effective strategy for you than you being able to say, oh, look, I stopped them from passing any bills. That's what you sent me there to do for. I couldn't help you because I had to take, bipartisanship that they refused to say. They told me to my face, we're not going to work with you. But I had to keep trying for bipartisanship, and I wouldn't allow any bills that you find popular that will help you. West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the country. You got to do something for your constituents, Joe, if you want to stay reelected. And the answer is not absolutely nothing. Now, let's talk about constituents a little bit more. Because like I covered yesterday, there's this Republican push, and their argument for rolling back voter rights is we need to have better voters so it's okay to have less. That's one of their arguments. That's one of the things that they're pushing. At least 3 times it's been said. Now, that is an incredibly dumb argument. The idea that we have less voters but better will be better for us is stupid because the people who are sent there don't care about what their voters think. Well, then why do we keep sending them? Because like I said in the gerrymandering aspect, it doesn't matter. They're going to be in those positions because of who they are, because of the name next to them. And let's look at a good example of this. We're going to look at Missouri. Now, Missouri, Josh Hawley's state, voted for Medicare. They had a referendum in the last election to expand Medicare, and it passed. The Republicans in charge of that are not funding it. What would happen if they expanded Medicare? As many as 275,000 additional Missourians could get coverage if there's funding for the program. 250,000. On the House floor, this is the budget House Budget Chairman Committee. Medicare expansion is wrong for Missouri. I think it's wrong for the budget. Federal government covers 60% of the cost. Compare that to Washington, covers only 60%. 90% of the cost will be covered. Will be covered for this expansion. They are not doing the will of the people. 6 percentage points to expand this. This is an expansion for health care for people. It is being covered mostly by the federal government from either Obamacare or the American Rescue Plan. Missouri is currently running a surplus, and their response is it's going to cost us too much in order to make sure that almost 300,000 people are covered by Medicare. Now, for those jackasses who say having less voters is better, explain to me how people voting for something. Oh, here it is. Additionally, the American Rescue Plan, which President Biden signed into law last month, compels the federal government to pitch an extra 5% cost of the new expansion in states. In Missouri, that would amount to $1 billion over the next 2 years, according to the Center for Medicare and Medical Service. So they're only covering 5%. Now, let me continue my other thought. For those of you who are telling me that having more aware constituents, but less of them, would be the answer, how is it the constituents' fault that they did their job? They voted for the thing that they wanted. They went to the polls, they voted, and they made their voices heard. The people who they sent there, unfortunately, said, screw you, I know better than you. That's not how this is supposed to work. And the answer is, you vote all of those people out. You don't change the voting base, you change the people in charge. That's how America is supposed to work. Now, let's talk very briefly about voting, because it is important. Here is a map. How old is this? This is from about a year ago. So none of the voters registration laws have passed yet. They just haven't, according to this. So from this, easiest states to vote in are the darker green, and the most difficult states to vote in are the lighter green. Number one in this list is Texas. Texas is the hardest state in the country to vote in. You know, the second hardest state to vote in is Georgia. Georgia just passed a law that would limit the amount of people who could vote. But why am I showing you this? Because Texas is looking to advocate for this bill, SB 7. Now, SB 7 is going to limit voting. Now, what happened during the election in Texas is they had these drive-in votings in one of their counties. Let me see if I can find which county it was. Harris County. About partway through the election, the Republicans sued to have all the votes in Harris County's drive-ins thrown out. Just thrown out. It was 110,000 votes. They just wanted to get rid of them. And they were ultimately voted down because they didn't do it early enough. So, what are some of the things in this bill? Originally, it was going to limit early voting from 7 to 7. Now, the problem with that is there was longer hours in Harris County and other large counties that ran until 10. And they did this for several days. And the reason you need those is because people like shift workers who don't get out till 7 or later don't work regular hours. Or if you're going to be a normal working person and you work till 5 and then you have to go vote after that and you only have 2 hours, well, how are you going to be able to find time to vote? Let's see. It would also prohibit the days of 24-hour voting in Harris County, and would outlaw drive-in voting, both of which were incredibly useful. Their argument is that this would limit overnight voting presented for poll watchers. Now, poll watchers are not public watchdogs, inherently partisan figures appointed by candidates and political parties to serve at polling places. And poll watchers had access to both of these things. So if passed into law, this legislation would broaden poll watchers' access at poll places, even giving them power to video record voters receiving assistance in filling out their ballots if the poll watcher reasonably believes the help is unlawful. Now, how many reports did we see during the election of people voting illegally? Whether it was Steven Crowder saying it was, they're stuffing the ballots in coming from at night, or there was a water main burst, or, I saw a black guy voting. Well, people just said, that's unreasonable for them to be voting, so we're going to record this. This is how you end up with conspiracy theories. This is how we ended up with that stupid Sharpie conspiracy theory that didn't make any sense. This bill would allow, though, for people who have a disability to request a ballot for each individual election, or to apply once for ballots in every election in a calendar year. So the bonus for this is it would allow the bill originally was supposed to say that they had to prove their disability or condition with a written documentation for the Social Security Administration or a doctor's note to qualify for it. So this is a good thing to have in this bill. They rejected a dozen amendments, and the whole point of this is to stop people from voting. There is no voter fraud. Part of this bill also says that you can't, let me see if I can find that specific. Prohibits on sending vote-by-mail applications to voters who haven't requested them, comes after a pandemic-era election that saw a significant increase in voters cast by vote-by-mail. So, this is part of the big lie. This is part of the lie every single time. Vote-by-mail is unsecure and ripe for fraud. Ballot boxes are unsecure and ripe for fraud. Ben Shapiro just made this argument. Ben Shapiro is an idiot. Let's look at some examples. This is Oregon. Oregon has the longest history of vote by mail, voting exclusively by mail. They send it to every single constituent as long as you are a registered voter. So no, they will not be sending it to illegal immigrants. That's not how that works. They have almost zero voter fraud in almost 20 years of doing this. Actually, more than 20 years. It's 23. There is no, look, I can't say this enough. Voter fraud is essentially a myth. There have been so few cases, it's a statistical anomaly that has not ever thrown an election into doubt, except for the Republicans stealing the election in South Carolina 9th District. And that is because the Republican operative there threw out and changed mail-in ballots in order to win the election. That is the only case ever of people changing an election due to voter fraud. There is no proof. It's substantial proof of any other changes in elections because of voter fraud. There is certainly no proof that the election in 2020 was stolen because science and data and facts don't agree with that lie. They just don't. It's as simple as that. So now we're going to shift from all those coverage to we're going to talk about mass shootings. Now, specifically in America, we have had, let me see if I can find a past summary. Okay, so mass shootings. This says 417. Okay, I thought it was much less. We're going to have to figure that out. Number of incidents reported and verified. So that's 2. So this says 417. The last data I saw was 129. So why are we talking about mass shootings? Well, let's first discuss what a mass shooting is. A mass shooting is an incident involving multiple victims of gun violence. There's no widely accepted definition of the term mass shooting. The United States FBI allows the Investigative Assistance for Violent Crimes Act of 2012 definition for active shooter incidents and mass killings, defined by the law as 3 or more people in public places. Based on this, it is generally agreed that a mass shooting is whenever 3 or more people are shot, injured, or killed, not including the shooters. Okay? So generally 3 or more people who are shot in a single shooting. So yesterday, Joe Biden decided to take on mass shootings, or he's going to aim at gun control. Now let's be clear: 11,000 people have died. Or does this actually back this up? This is all causes. Okay. From at least 11,000 people have died from gun violence, not mass shootings. So we're going to go over this, and then I'm going to talk about some of the things he says in this and some of the arguments against this. And then we're going to go into a deep dive. What is that deep dive going to entitle? We're going to look at the myth of a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. Why are we looking at this? Because this is part of the NRA's argument. Speaking of the NRA, the president of them, because they're currently they're in a lawsuit, argued that he had to go to a super yacht because he was afraid of the backlash after, I believe it was Sandy Hook, which kind of seems crazy that the president of the NRA didn't just get a gun. That's what they tell us. Guns make you safer. Anyway, let's see what Joe Biden has to say about gun control. This does skip in between because it just hits the main points, but we'll go over it.
Taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake from what we're talking about.
Now, let's be clear. The argument here is twofold. The argument is, the super disingenuous one is anything is approaching gun control as attempting to take your guns away. The other one is the rights of the gun owners cannot be infringed, but it's the rights of a well-regulated militia. Also, the people who argue that, this is your rights cannot be infringed are the same people who say, no. We just have to go after the criminals and the people who are who have mental illness. How do you square that circle? How do you say there are some restrictions there, but you say there can't be other restrictions? Square that circle for me, because that's talking out of both sides of your mouth, and it doesn't make any sense because you're full of shit. Okay? What Joe Biden is about to show you, or tell you, is generally piecemeal. It is very, very light and may have zero impact, this particular part. There are bills that will do more, and there is a thing he's going to talk about that might actually help. The actual things he's talking about, these first two, are not going to help much.
But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. We call it freedom of speech.
This is the other argument that they're going to have off of this. And I'm going to show you Laura Boebert's response to this specifically because it's either her or Dinesh D'Souza, and I want to make the distinction with Boebert. His argument here is there is no limitations. There is no absolute amendment. Like the First Amendment, you can't advocate for violence. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You just can't push certain things. There's limitations on the amendments. Okay, so this idea that any amendment is superseding or is infallible is just not true. Now, the perfect example of this is the 18th Amendment. I think it's the 18th. Whichever one was prohibition, which was then overturned by a future amendment. But let's continue.
From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. From the very beginning the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. So the idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
There is no equivalent to the gun violence that faces Americans in any other country except for like Yemen and Syria, which are countries like in the middle of a civil war / proxy wars. That is the only equivalent to the amount of gun violence in America. But once again, we're number one. We're number one.
And today I'm announcing several initial steps my administration is taking to curb this epidemic of gun violence. Much more need to be done, but the first, want to rein in the proliferation of so-called ghost guns. These are guns that are homemade, built from a kit, that include directions on how to finish the firearm. You can go buy the kit.
Yeah, this doesn't seem to be enough that this would be a huge thing, because there's just not enough data to show that these guns are a massive issue. It is a problem that people can just make their own guns because they're not registered, but it doesn't appear that these are a massive cause of the violence.
They have no serial numbers, so when they show up at a crime scene, they can't be traced. And the buyers aren't required to pass a background check to buy the kit. You know, I want to see these kits treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act, which is going to require that the seller and manufacturers make the key parts with serial numbers. The second action we're going to take, back in the year 2000, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms released a report on its investigations of firearms trafficking in America. The report was of pivotal value. It was an important tool for policymakers when I was in the Senate and beyond, at all levels, to stop firearms from being illegally diverted into dangerous hands. Today, with online sales and ghost guns, times and trafficking methods have changed, and we have to adjust. We also have to ask the Justice Department to release a new annual report. This report will better help policymakers address firearms trafficking as it is today.
This is good. This is more data is always better.
Not what it was yesterday. The third change, we want to treat pistols modified with stabilizing braces with the seriousness they deserve.
Now, modifying these, so my understanding of these are basically just like a piece of plastic that helps you aim better. And I don't know, I mean, that was done in one of the more recent shootings, so it's similar to bump stocks after the Vegas shooting, but I don't think it's a huge issue or something you regulate.
Modifications to firearms that make them more lethal should be subject to the National Firearms Act. The National Firearms Act requires that a potential owner pay $200 fee and submit their name and other identifying information to the Justice Department, just as they would if they went out and purchased a silencer for a gun. Fourthly, during my campaign for president, I wanted to make it easier for states to adopt extreme risk protection order laws. They're also called red flag laws, which everybody in this lawn knows, but many people listening do not know. These laws allow a police or family member to petition a court in their jurisdiction and say, I want you to temporarily remove from the following people any firearm they may possess.
Now, these laws were weakened under Donald Trump because one of the things he did was lessen the restrictions. So if you have somebody who the court has deemed is physically incapable of taking care of themselves or their finances, under Donald Trump, he allowed those people to be able to own a firearm. You can't take care of yourself and your money, but you can get a gun.
They're a danger and a crisis. They're presenting a danger to themselves and to others. Additionally, we recognize that cities across the country are experiencing historic spikes in homicides as the law enforcement.
Okay, so going back to the red flag laws. So the problem with the red flag laws, and I think he might go into this if he doesn't, it's in a longer clip. They're not universal. So one state's red flag laws could be separate from a different state's red flag laws. How long that gun is taken away, who has the right to take it, whether they have the right to lose the gun prior to an appeal in court. So there are more issues involved than just does a red flag law exist? So what he's either going to advocate for in this video or is advocating for in the longer clips is for a universal idea of what a red flag law should be to be adopted by states. They don't have to adopt it, but the goal is to have them adopt it because red flag laws do actually lower gun violence.
Tell you, the violence is hitting black and brown communities the hardest. Homicide is the leading cause of death of black boys and men ages 15 to 34. Gun violence in America, for those of you who think of this from an economic standpoint listening to me, estimated to cost the nation $280 billion, let me say it again, $280 billion a year. Finally, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the key agency enforcing gun laws, hasn't had a permanent director since 2015. Today, I'm proud to nominate.
Okay, so I don't know who the guy he's going to nominate for. The fact that it hasn't had a director since what do you say, 14, 15?
Hasn't had a permanent director since 2015.
Is pretty much on par for what the Trump administration was doing, where they didn't do anything. Although the last year of the Obama administration would be 2015, 2016. So they should have had a permanent director then, unless that was blocked by the Senate, which is a very high likelihood. But look, the whole point of this is the red flag law stuff is good. The other stuff doesn't appear to be consequential. Now, why is this important? Well, we're going to go look at Lauren Boebert. Lauren Boebert is a congresswoman. Her whole thing is guns. That's literally all she is. She's also objectively an idiot. So let's see some of the things she responded to. First, there's this stupid argument. Handing the government more control is a recipe for starvation, disaster, and ultimately death of society. Sound dramatic? Ask the guy cooking his cat for dinner in Venezuela. Now, this is stupid for a couple reasons. One, their argument is always that if you allow for any type of expansion in government, we're going to be Venezuela. Regardless of all the other things that put Venezuela in the reason it is, America, the collapse of it as a petrostate, things like that. That's what caused, but giving them health care caused them to collapse. Like all the other oh no, every other country that had universal health care has not collapsed. Damn, if only you had thought about this argument. For starvation, Americans are starving. We have food deserts. This is not an issue. This should not be an issue. We have massive waste. This is incredibly stupid. So, anyway, let's just go continue to some of the other things she said. So here's sadly where a sitting congresswoman doesn't understand the Constitution. She says, when Joe Biden says no constitutional amendment is absolute, where does that leave the 19th Amendment? Just curious if I'll be able to vote in the next election. Now, according to, I believe the U.S. Constitution should have never been changed in any way, shape, or form. It's either you or Marjorie Taylor Greene who said that. Based on your own stupidity, you wouldn't be able to vote under your own argument anyway. But we're going to get to amendments in a minute. Because guess what, class? We're going to learn some things today. And maybe we'll teach Ms. Boebert. Maybe she'll follow me and she'll see this video someday. And in this day in history, April 8th, 2021, Joe Biden stated no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Yes, we know this. How do we know this? Amendments have changed. How does this change? You can change the Constitution. How does that happen? You amend the Constitution. There are two methods to that. One is Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislators of 2/3 of several states, call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid in all intended purposes as part of this Constitution. When ratified by the legislators of 3/4 of several states, or by the convention for 3/4 therefore. So, what does this mean? The only way to propose an amendment is to have 3/4 of the Congress or the states decide that they want to do this. So, her argument is that because no amendment is absolute, you can just overturn them willy-nilly. That is almost impossible. There is no argument to say this. There's currently there's currently being a fight for constitutional amendments. There's always going to be calls for different ones. You cannot overturn an amendment. You have to create another amendment to overturn a previous one. The reason we will not have a convention is because of this fear of a runaway convention, even though that fear is not backed up in facts. That's why Wolfpack is just trying to put a constitutional amendment to take corporate money out of politics. So there's that. So, on board, I'm an idiot. Big shocker there. But now we're going to go to the main part of this. We're going to go into mass shootings. Now, let's be clear what I'm going to say here, because people I've already online misconstrued the questions that I have asked. The argument I am going to make is not that guns don't protect people in self-defense. The argument I'm making, and the argument I'm going to look to see if the data backs me up on, is that the facts don't support the good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. And to prove this, we have to look at how mass shootings have evolved. So, first, we have to look at mass shootings. Gun violence in general. As it currently stands, America has more guns than people. Gun violence archives. Published date, this was today. Total number of incidents in 2014, 40,000. Total number in 2015, 49,000. Total number in 2016, 55,000. 2017, 59,000. 2018, 55,000. This is 2019 is obviously going to be a well, this is actually strange that this number is not higher. This ended with the pandemic. So it dropped in 2019. And then it bounced back up in 2020. So during the pandemic, it dropped. So with the exception of 2019, gun violence has increased every single year. Okay? So the argument is, does a good guy with a gun stop a bad guy with a gun? Well, let's see what some of the data says. What? That's not what I wanted to happen. Mass shootings jumped 50% in 2022, large part due to the pandemic. Now, this goes against Tom Cotton's argument. The argument of not having enough people in jail. Why is there an increase in crime 2020 to 2021? It could be because of a pandemic and economic hardship, followed by a historic protest that was met with police violence that was racialized and used as a wedge issue. Couldn't be that. But no, we don't put enough people in jail. So here is events that injured or killed 4 more people excluding the perpetrator. This is by month. So we had 95 incidents in June. You can see how high this number has gone up. It's been relatively steady throughout the years until last year. It shows that mass shooting surged as much as 45% as many states reported unprecedented increase in weapons-related incidents. So, you would think with an increase in gun violence, you would have an increase in more people stopping gun violence, right? Because we now have more guns than ever. Remember, there was a historic buyout of guns with the first stimulus check. You would think that those things would correlate. That's not what happens. Let's look at some of these articles. This is from, when is this? When was this written? This is from 2019. So this is the first article I found on this. So according to this article, this discovers compiled data on 316 mass attacks in the United States since 2020, or since 2000. This was written to last year. Of those 316 attacks, 10%, 10 of them, not even 10%, was shot by a citizen. 40 of them were subdued by citizens. And generally, these citizens are unarmed. So let's put these numbers together. So for 316, so according to this data here, for every 32 mass shooting attempts, one is stopped by a person with a gun. So having more guns doesn't mean that you're going to stop more violence. This is the Giffords Project? Giffords. It's just called Giffords. Who is Giffords? Giffords is started after Gabby Gifford, who was the congressperson who in 2011 was shot in the head. So let's look at some of their data. Now, they have actual data embedded in these. We're just going to look at the headlines. Armed civilians rarely successfully intervene in mass shootings. An FBI analysis of 160 active shooting incidents from 2000 to 2013, and this will go with one of the other studies, found that active shooting incidents are rarely stopped by armed individuals who are not law enforcement returning fire. In fact, 4 times as many shootings were stopped by unarmed civilians restraining the shooter. This goes back to the other data that I showed. This will correlate with data that I will show you in this video, and it will correlate with data from this other study. The gun lobby claims that shooters target gun-free zones because they fear a good guy with a gun, and that arming more people in more places will deter crime. However, most mass shooters target a specific person, group, or institution with whom they have a grievance, making it unlikely that gun-free policies affects the choice of targets. They don't care. They're going to go to these places regardless of whether it's deemed a high volume of guns or not. No credible statistical evidence to show that a permissive concealed carry laws reduce crime. Instead, the evidence suggests that laws that make it easier for more people to carry guns in public may actually increase the frequency of some types of violent crime, including gun homicides. Now, there is data that shows, and this is the only argument I will make against self-defense, that having a firearm in your house actually leads you to more likely to either commit suicide or hurt somebody in your home with that firearm. There's data that purports to that. So that's there. So let's go to this. Now, this is Jordan Klepper did a thing for the Daily Show. I skipped most of it because he's mocking how easy it is to get a gun. Now he's talking to a guy about firearms training. Okay, so this is him being read. This is here. This is about halfway through it. So this is conclusions. Conclusions. I want to highlight this specific part. The study identified 13.1% of 160 incidents where unarmed citizens made the selfless and deeply personal choice to face the dangers of an active shooter. In those incidents, the citizens safely and successfully disrupted the shooting. In 11 of the 21 incidents, unarmed principals, teachers, and other school staff and students confronted the shooter to end the threat. In 10 incidents, citizens working or shopping when the shooting began successfully restrained shooters until police arrived. And in 6 other incidents, armed off-duty police officers, citizens, and security guards risked their lives to successfully end the threat. Now, I want to be clear about what I was trying to say specifically to this last part. I'm not saying that having an off-duty police officer in an area doesn't mean that it's likely that somebody's going to stop it. My argument here is that the average citizen who just has a firearm on them is not likely to stop a mass shooting, and the data purports to my argument. That's just the way it is. The data backs me up. So let's start wrapping this up. Because I'm about to go into a long diatribe about this. In America, we have a history of mass violence. We just do. We are just a mass violent culture. It's part of our culture. We also have a history of guns. We have more guns than anyone else, and we shoot more people than anyone else. We just do. Part of it is our culture, part of it is training, part of it is a lot of things. The argument from one side of the aisle is that there can be no change to this at all. That a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun, and the more people we arm, the more likely that we are to have people being stopped from mass shootings. I just showed you a plethora of data. The data does not purport to that. It doesn't. So let's be clear. The people who are spending all their money on their firearms because they need to feel safe are the same people who argue that I will not deal with COVID because I'm healthy or because of God, that He will decide to protect me. These people will then argue that I need a gun, I need a rocket launcher to go to Subway to protect myself. Those people are the problem. Not the problem of killing people, but they're the reason these type of things exist. This idea that I'm so special that I can protect my own, I have to have a firearm to protect my own self from all these other people, does not purport to the data. You are not more likely to stop a mass shooting than you are to hurt somebody else or yourself with a firearm. The data has proven this. It conclusively, over and over again, studies have proven this. There is no data that purports to a large amount of mass shootings, which we have in this country. There's at least been 128 mass shootings this year. I'm not arguing for the people at home self-defense. I am arguing that you should not be able, my right to exist should not be overshadowed by your thought that you could be a hero. Because mass shootings happen everywhere. And if you are such a tough guy that you won't wear a mask, but you're such a chicken shit that you got to walk around with an AR-15, well, you're part of the problem. Because you are more likely to die from COVID than you are from gun violence. And you are more likely to hurt other people with your firearm or yourself than you are to stop a mass shooting. And do I know every single law that's going to affect it? No. But the answer can't be, oh, you're treading on my rights and you're going to take my gun away because you want background checks. Stop with the hyperbole. The data and the information does not purport to your side. Americans are dying every day. Americans have been dying for God knows how long. When was Columbine? The 90s? Sandy Hook was 2013. A couple of years ago was Vegas. When is the next one? When is the next one going to happen in your town? When is the next one going to happen in your state? There will be one tonight. There will be one tomorrow. There will be more than one tomorrow. There will be more than one today. There was two yesterday. There was the football player who shot up a bunch of his the ex-football player who shot up his therapist, and then there was one after Greg Abbott said, we will not allow any type of gun control. I will pass a law that will supersede the federal government's gun laws. And then there was a shooting there. This study that I showed you was from Texas. The data does not purport to this lie. And the more you people stand there and say, no, don't tread on me, my gun rights supersede everything else because this is America and I have a right to own 45 AR-15 so I can feel safe going to Subway. You are part of the reason Americans are dying. There's blood on your hands. You're the same people who argue that masks don't work, that government lockdowns are unconstitutional. You are not just such a special snowflake that everything about you can't be overridden. You will still get shot. Somebody you know will probably get shot. A school near you will get shot. It does not matter. That's how America is. You can't lock things down hard enough to do it. There was the one in Ohio. The guy shot for about 30 seconds. He killed like 9 people. And the police were on the scene. So unless these same people who are advocating for every single person to be armed don't understand data, which is pretty likely because that's how you would end up in a situation like this. You've either been lied to or you don't understand data. Unless you're advocating for that, for every single citizen is to be armed at all times, and that every single citizen has to go through the hours and hours and hours, because it takes hours, and it was in that clip, if you keep watching the rest of it, to be ready for this. They're police officers in that clip as well. They say, look, you can never have enough training. Unless you advocate for infinite training for every single citizen to find a non-effective solution to a problem that is killing hundreds of Americans, thousands of Americans every year, And if you say, oh, well, this place has strict gun laws and that place has strict gun laws and they don't have, there's too many firearms. There's too many states where firearms laws or things that were proven to lower firearm deaths don't have them. Tennessee just passed a law that says anybody over 18 can just carry over 21 can just carry a firearm, concealed carry for a handgun. The the Colorado shooting that just happened? The NRA was boasting that they managed to overturn the firearm restriction right a couple days before the guy shot it. There are weapons people should not have. It's the same reason you can't get a tank. It's the same reason you can't walk around with a tactical nuke. To be clear, the people who are advocating that I will be the one, the people who believe this is your thought process, that I will be the superhero. The statistics do not back that up. There is so much data out there of how many mass shootings that there are that prove that you are wrong. Maybe you're a responsible gun owner. And I'm not advocating for people not to own guns. I'm advocating for that we do something to stop this goddamn issue. And if the answer is more guns, you're an idiot. And you're wrong. Because that's what we have. And it doesn't stop it. So maybe we should try something else. Maybe you should stop listening to the propaganda. Maybe you should actually believe the things that need to be believed. Maybe you should look at the data. And I just showed you the data. And I'm sure people are going to have an issue with this at some point when I, get bigger, or people who happen to watch this now. The data does not purport that you will be a hero. The data purports more likely you're going to be a villain, or you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else with you. So grow up. Stop being so chicken shit you have to walk with an AR-15 to your subway. Put on a goddamn mask and get vaccinated. So that's where we're going to end this. I hope you guys like this. This was a little bit longer than I normally go. There was a lot more data and stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. And please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter @FacesIdeas. I know more of you are watching than are subscribing. I have the data on it. Please like and subscribe. I want to spread this message. I want to, be able to reach more people, to talk to them. I want to educate more people. I want more people to hear the things that I say. And if you clearly are listening, you like what I have to say. So you should like and subscribe and share this to your friends. Because I'm happy to get into an argument about this. Because I saw the data. I showed you the data. I'm right on most of these things. I'm sure you can find data that'll counteract me. Let's have a talk about this. All right? Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching Fresh Face.